Good afternoon, everybody. It is June the 22nd, Wednesday, I do believe. Um, yes, 22nd. Yesterday was 21st. I have already dealt with a situation in my family that is slightly disturbing and brings up certain emotions because of two other members of the family who passed away from COVID on Jerry's side of the family. My cousin who lives and works in Florida, um, his wife passed away from COVID. I don't know when it happened. All I know is mom got a phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning from her sister, telling mom that she passed away, and they're saying COVID. Um, and here I am coughing, but I know I've got a clean bill of health because I've already been checked, and no, it's not anything bad. I I feel for my cousin, I really do, because granted he has no kids. Like me and his sister, we couldn't have children for one medical reason or another, and he's got his fur babies, his cats, his dogs. I think I heard him mention once, or his spouse mention once, that they had ferrets. So yeah, he's gonna have to deal with the fur babies and his job, and all the things that are going to have to be dealt with after the funeral and the wake. And I don't know who all. I don't know if we're going to get to go down there or what. By the sounds of things, I don't think mom's going. I don't know if his mom's going or not, but they were all mom and my two aunts, which includes basically mom, her sister, and sister-in-law. We're talking about what to send down there. I think the reason why they're not going is because if COVID is a situation down there, they don't want to deal with it. That in fact, there's no that in fact, excuse me, there's no details of what's going to happen. Whether she was originally from Pennsylvania, so we don't know if they're going to transport her body up there for burial or whatnot, or what they're going to do, because a lot of times they cannot release the body to the family until they know a lot of different details. I think the only reason why my one brother-in-law who passed away from COVID was released back to the family was my older brother-in-law can be very persuasive because he knows people who knows people. I'm not going to get into details. It's not legal, but they're just high up people in the police force and places like, and things like that. But I don't know what they're going to do with her. I don't know if they're going to release her or what. So it's just one of those. Yeah, I don't know. I just know I feel for him. He's not probably on social media, but his first name is Joel. And no, his last name is not Henson, and I'm not going to say his last name because that's not important. What's important is the factor of what he's going to have to go through, and I know it's going to be hard on him, and because of the situation, we don't know if he's going to have to go through quarantine and checks and all that stuff before he can do anything, which can be a real pain in the butt because anyhow, I'm not gonna talk more about it because it's out of my control. It's out of my reach. It's all I can do is sit here at home and you know, feel for him and think about him and pray for his well-being. And that's all I can do. I mean, there's not much else I can do at this point in time. Anyhow, today I wanted to read a little bit out of the Viking Handbook. I'm going to just briefly touch on what they call table manners. They ate foods off of wooden plates or in wooden bowls or bowls made out of soapstone. I couldn't think of it at first. Their typical, according to archaeologists, their typical kitchen cutlery is a wooden fork, a wooden spoon, and the fork was a kind of a two-pronged deal. And I don't know if it was wood or metal. I'm trying to... ordinary axe for butchering animals and cutting up meat. Wooden tongs and trays with finely carved handles. An actual knife with a wooden handle, like a metal knife with a wooden handle, and a wooden spoon. So this right here would be your typical cutlery in the kitchen for service and eating. And then they go to talk about the brew mistress. You heard that right, mistress. Women were known for brewing up the mead and the various drinks. Now, mead was a celebratory drink. So basically, mead would only be pulled out by the earl or chieftain's command for holiday celebrations, weddings, birth, celebrating the birth of a member of the tribe. Mead was for special occasions, not daily drinks. Now, I've already read this section, so I'm paraphrasing a lot of it. Everyday drinks in your common, typical home was basically beer, or what they called back then ale, a type of alcoholic drink, milk from a cow, or whatever animal that you have to milk, and water. So basically, your typical drink in a typical home would be either a homemade brew, milk, or water. So you gotta realize they started allowing their kids to start drinking at a young age. You know, and they had various things like malt and yeast and herbs to basically put into their home brews. And it was usually the woman who made these items up. Back then, women were basically just as much in control of everything that had to do with the homestead as the husband, because a lot of times the husbands during the raiding season would go out raiding, and if something were to happen to the husband and the lady of the house, the woman of the house, became a widow, everything that was the husband's is now hers. And if she had old enough children to basically run the show, she would be the one going out raiding to get the treasures and whatnot to bring home to use for whatever purposes back home. But a lot of times, depending on the age of the children and the homestead and the lady of the house's responsibilities, yes, she would inherit everything the husband had. And depending on her station in the tribe, or depending on brothers or sisters of the husband who went raiding, they would bring her a portion of their take from the raid to help her pay for the farm and whatnot for a simple trade-off of like food, because they went raiding and they could not make their own food, gather their own food, have their own food. And a lot of times the brother, the eldest brother, if he was not deceased, or the next male in line of the family, he would not come to take over the farmstead. He would come to help on the farmstead when he could. And he would live there as basically a watcher or caretaker. Not to take over anything, because it's now all hers. She decides. Now, if she decides that she doesn't want him to live on the farmstead or help out, she has the right to basically say, no, I'm fine. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you for bringing me a small portion from your raid, but I don't need help around the farm. I don't need you to live with us. If you want to come by every day to help us out, that's fine, Danny, but I don't want you to live here. That's her choice. Just like back in the Viking era, if a woman felt that a man was unfaithful or she was not happy with him because of one thing or another, she can get a divorce. She can literally divorce him, take her half or her portion of the farm and homestead with her when she left. The children can decide if they want to come with her, stay with dad, whatever. They had a lot of things that we take for granted nowadays. Nowadays compared to then, is a woman can divorce a man just like they could back then, even though most of the rest of the world back then was like, no, a woman has no power, no say, cannot be divorced, cannot get a divorce or anything like that. Today, the thing is, women and sometimes men, both genders, can divorce their spouse at the drop of a dime. Oh, I just don't like what you're doing. You're not doing this. You're not being, you're not doing what I want you to do. You're not letting me be, whatever. They can do, modern day women can divorce a man for any reason. Don't like the smell of your feet. Don't like the way you, treat me. Don't like the way you help out around the house. Whatever reason. Back then, during the Viking time, it had to be an extreme situation for a woman to be granted divorce. A lot of times it had to be like infidelity. Something really, really, out of the norm. Something that would be, by the woman's consideration, not something she wanted to deal with on a regular basis. I'll take for granted, if you watched Vikings, Lagertha divorced, basically gave Ragnar a divorce because he was too infatuated with the other woman. Yeah, that's a good reason for a divorce. But back then, it would have to be an extreme condition for divorce, because a lot of times, trying to find another husband or trying to just be a woman on your own, not saying that they weren't tough enough to do it, but lifestyle back in the Viking era, plus the climate they lived in, was harsh. It was harsh. It was cold, rugged, difficult to farm climate. That's why, for the most part, when the Norsemen became Vikings, went out raiding, because Viking is an occupation, it was because of the factor the other countries that they visited, basically, before they became rowdy and did the Viking thing, they were just looking for a chunk of land that was not occupied to call their own, to cultivate the food, cut down the wood, and send it back to Norway, because Norway needed it. Or Scandinavia, not just Norway, but the Scandinavian countries needed it. It was because of the people who lived on those lands was not willing to let these Vikings or these Norsemen just come and settle. Because that's all they were trying to do. They were just trying to come, find a spot that was not being used to call their own for a while. They were typically known as farmers and tradesmen before they became the warriors of history. And that's because Britain, because that's the first place they landed on, didn't want them. So they went, okay, fine. You want to fight? That's fine then. We are not afraid to back down from a fight. We live in a harsh country where you have to learn how to freaking deal with it. And a lot of the areas in Scandinavia were competing against each other as it was, just for usable land. And then when the Norsemen discovered Britain, it was like Scandinavia, the Danes from Denmark were like, oh, you know what? You got a great idea. They kicked you out for no reason. You weren't trying to do anything but farm and take a chunk of land without being rude or harsh. Let's just go take over the whole territory. You know, they want to kick us out of a small spot. Fine, we'll kick them off the whole continent, or the whole island, the whole of Britain. Granted, if you've ever seen a map of the old times, you see that nobody tried to settle anywhere in Scotland, and I joke about that because I have Scottish background as well. That yeah, the Picts and whatnot were like, no, we're gonna fight you for this land, and we'll fight to the death. And they proved to be a little too much. Even the Romans didn't want to deal with this, the native Scots of the time, because of who they were and how fearful they can be compared to the whole Roman legions would try to go past what is now marked as Hadrian's Wall into the Scottish territory, and you'd be lucky if you get one half-dead centurion to come back down into England to the outpost at Hadrian's Wall and going, no, they came out of nowhere, they killed us, bleh. And the Romans went, yeah, let's build Hadrian's Wall, and we won't go on that side of the wall. They won't come on our side of the wall. And that's basically the brief history of Hadrian's Wall. But the women would be making the various brews, whether it's alcoholic or not. Most of the time, the brews were alcoholic. And they used all different kinds of herbs. And some of them, some of the ingredients they used, I've never heard of, and I'm like, okay. St. John's wort, well, I know what that is, and that was something they used in the Middle Ages, found throughout Scandinavia. Pine and spruce resin. I don't know much about that, but if it's what I think it is, it's what we now call, it's one of our artificial sugar sweeteners that has a, if not used properly, it could be dangerous because it's in mass quantities. It could be deadly. Or at least that's what somebody told me. I don't know if that's right, if that's true or not, but then they use things like heather, dandelions, juniper berries, hops. Well, we know what hops is. We know hops is the main ingredients for most beers. So they had different types of brews, beer and alcohol. Of course, back then it was not called beer, it was called ale. And then beer didn't come around until the English started to learn how to make their own variety, and it was a little bit stronger and more potent than regular ale. It was just straight up, beer back then was straight up alcohol from the hops. But then they also go talking about honey and mead. Mead, aka the nectar of the gods. And they talked about how to have beehives and make, use certain materials to make the beehive. Okay, that's... And they give you a little picture of a man-made beehive that the bees would take over. And the way they make it, the honey literally dripped from the bottom of this hive. And I want to redo this little thing because it kind of goes along to show the character or demeanor of the Norse people. And they're always using the wrong word. Norse beekeepers, they say Viking, but I'm going to say the right word. Norse beekeepers would cut out the honeycomb and place them in a cloth bag to drain primary clear honey. Wringing out the bag with the comb still inside produces B-grade honey. Then they would take the bag, leftover honeycomb, and scrape the wax and soak the whole mess in warm water to dilute any remaining honey. Straining these bee trash soap, and what's left is the base for mead. So they go through a process to get the proper quality of honey to make mead. And, you know, the fermentation process and all the other process to get it into the actual mead itself, the drink, takes a while. So to make one batch of mead, to fill up a couple bottles, basically, or whatever they use to store the mead in, took, well, it doesn't exactly say how long it took, but it took quite some time. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop on this here first. Well, yeah, I'm going to stop on this because tomorrow I'll do the next section, which is weaving and sewing. And it's talks about how they spun yarn and made, you know, various different items for clothing and whatnot, and the different dyes they used. The reason why I'm stopping there is because I want to talk about mead. As a lot of you may know, if you've been with me for a while, I drink mead. I like to get a bottle of mead or two every so often. Now, during the holiday season, or I shouldn't say holiday, I should say winter. During the winter season, I consume a little bit more mead than I do during the wintertime, because mead does two things for me. One, it helps me relax enough to fall asleep. Two, it's the way I drink the mead, which is room temperature. I do not refrigerate my mead. As far as I'm concerned, most European wines should be drank at room temperature or slightly chilled. Not stick in a refrigerator. Stick it in your pantry. Stick it in a spot in your, if you have a liquor cabinet. Most liquor cabinets are designed to keep things in the shadow, basically in darkness, because any good alcoholic beverage, if it has too much sunlight, it either kills the alcohol content, so you don't get that warm feeling. But mead is one of those things where you keep it chilled. You don't put it in your refrigerator. You just put it in a dark, dry spot, back of the pantry, in a closet, wherever. And you take it out. Once you crack it open, it's up to you if you want to put it in a refrigerator or not, but I don't. Mead has three functions for the Norseman, or me. One, it gives me a little bit of a buzz. Yeah. It helps warm me up, because it does warm up your innards, just like a good brandy will warm you up from the inside out. And it has that calming effect to help me fall asleep. Now, unlike most wines, which a lot of certain groups of people cannot drink fruit off the vine, which is like your Arabians, your Muslims. They don't drink They don't drink regular wine because it's off the vine and they can't touch it. It's a no-no. Mead is one of those things where anybody can drink it because it's made from honey. It's called honey wine by a lot of different people. Because in the sense, it's basically fermented and dealt with just like you would with wine, with grape wine, but instead of grapes, it's honey. Now, yes, you need a very large content or quantity of honey to make a good batch. Now, some people think a batch of mead should be like 3 or 4 bottles worth or more. To make large batches of mead means large amounts of honey. Now, unless you're a beekeeper, you don't get that large quantity of honey. Or, if you want to be a cheat, which, hey, in modern day times, if you can afford it, that's great, buy large quantities of honey from a manufacturer who basically makes honey makes the honey out of the honeycombs. Of course, in modern day times, we have a faster way of getting the honey off the comb. And that beeswax can be turned into all kinds of things. Soap is one. Lip balm is another. The amazing usages from bees between the honey and the comb is amazing. I think it's one of the greatest things that we ever discovered and made. Is basically not wasting the whole, like some places they have artificial cones. So what they do is they get the honey off the cone and then they put it back into the bee box so the bees can go back to using it. Now, a lot of people will think, "Oh, if you know what honey is made out of, you want..." Hey, you know what? I don't care, man. A lot of people complain about honey because it's made, the way it's made is basically bee vomit in a honeycomb. And a lot of times these cones have larvae in it. Well, back in the Viking era, they didn't care. If it added flavor to the mead, or could be used for whatever, they would use it. Maybe they'd wait until a certain time of the year, because then all the bees have been born and the cones are just full of the honey. A lot of times the cones don't have larvae in it; they're just capped off. The honey is put in there and capped off to feed off of during the wintertime. I don't know anything about beekeeping. I don't know anything about how the bees reproduce, and I just know that their byproduct is delicious. It's sweet. It's great in my tea. It's great, in some of my recipes. It's people want to turn their nose up to certain kinds of things because the fact oh man, that stuff the bees cough up after they get back to the hive. And the thing is the way I think of it is, God put everything on the face of the planet for a purpose. If the bee's purpose is to provide sweet nectar or a sweet byproduct for human consumption, whether it's used in baking breads or sweetening up honey, or some people prefer honey over sugar, because getting honey is a lot safer and a lot less dangerous than getting sugar from the cane. If you look at the history of how sugar came about and how they were producing it back in the 15, 16, and 1700s, you would hate sugar too. Look at the history. Yeah, it was hard, dangerous work. and you can either get burnt from the boiling sugar, or hurt just getting the sugar cane, harvested. And up until probably the 1800s, they were using slave labor. Because, hey, let them get burnt, let them get hurt. Us white people are just going to enjoy their byproduct or whatnot. No, thank you. No. Of course, nowadays it's harvested by machine and there's no people that can get hurt, but still, the history of sugar alone is just not exactly something, not something I'm proud of as a white guy. There's a lot of things that my white ancestors did that I'm not proud of. Slavery was one of those. No. No. I personally think every man, woman, and child should have the right to do what they feel is just for them, as long as nobody else is getting hurt. I think each individual adult human being, or each individual person after the age of, let's say, 13, when they're supposedly, by old school beliefs, as soon as you hit 13, you're a man. You now have the ability to make your own decisions and choices. And it's one of those things where, yes, I can understand up until you're considered an adult, like modern day 20s, you're responsible for your actions after a certain age. Now, anything before a certain age, I blame it on upbringing. Once you hit 20, 21, you are now teaching yourself, and you're raising yourself. So any decisions you make, you're liable for. Any decisions you make after the age of 13, you can look at the what happens and sit there and go, okay, that was either bad upbringing because he didn't know the full ramifications of what could occur to him because of his actions, but he still needs to be responsible for the action. But life nowadays compared to then, a lot of people say it's hard. No. As a child from the 70s, I can tell you that between 70 and late 80s, I might have had it easy because my dad was alive, and we were a military family, and we got to travel to Germany and see Germany, and I got to be born over in a country that I don't remember because I was too young to remember when we left. But even the 70s compared to today was easier, or not easier, excuse me, harder, because we didn't have not everybody had a TV. Nobody had a computer until the 80s. I'm the generation that saw the invention of the home computer, the personal computer, this iPhone, handheld phone, wireless phones, basically, wireless systems. You wanted to make a phone call back then, you had to be inside your house, pick up your phone, either punch the buttons or do the rotary thing, which was a royal pain in the butt, as far as I'm concerned. Because if you misstepped on that rotary phone, you had to literally start all over. I mean, you had to literally push down the little button that the hand unit sat in and start all over. And boy, if you had more than seven numbers to rotate through, that was a royal pain. You literally had to memorize the numbers you were trying to dial, and that's where the word dial came from, because of those rotary phones. The first gaming console I remember having was Commodore 64 or something like that. Then the Atari. Our first computer was I can't remember if it was a Commodore or we called it a Trash 80, I think. back during the floppy disk. Yeah, the floppy disk before the hard disk. Things have changed in 50 years. Just think about how things have changed in the last 1,000 years or better, 1,000, 2,000 years. You know, I mean, I remember when things were, just simple letters, and now, if you want to deal with computers, it's, especially when the first system came out for the government, it was all ones and zeros and paper punch cards or big reels of electric tape. You know, but I mean, people want to sit there and go, "Oh, life is hard," and even me and even people who are older than me go, "You don't know hard. You got it so easy nowadays. It's crazy." And yet you want to complain about how hard it is. People joke about, yeah, I used to have to walk to school in the snow with no shoes on, up a hill each way. People want to go, how did you go up a hill each way? Well, just imagine. Say you live over here, there's a hill, the school's over here. So you're going up the hill and then back down the hill to get to school, and then up the hill and back down the hill to get home. Some people had that kind of, home or town or whatever. I can sit there and tell you that when I was in Germany, to get from where I lived off base to where they picked you up on base, you had to walk, if they didn't get to the snow before you had to go to, to the bus stop in the morning. I remember walking on a sidewalk to get to a bus stop one winter. And granted, at the time I was like maybe 4'5", 4'4", somewhere around there. I was over 4 foot, and I was walking along the sidewalk. And on each side of the sidewalk was this probably 6-foot mound of snow. And I was able to sit there and go, now I can understand what my parents were saying about the harshness of winter trying to get to school. Back in my youth, if we had a power outage, you had to use candles or flashlights. Mostly candles, because flashlights were, not as common as they are nowadays. Nowadays, power goes out, you flip a switch or pull a crank or something like that, or if you're working in a building, the building has these sensors that as soon as the power goes out, if it doesn't come back on within 5 minutes, you got a generator that pops on. Generator, wow, what was that? Only government buildings had those when I was a kid, and they were big, bulky, and noisy, and smelled like diesel. I remember because there was one near my school or on the premises of the school in Germany, because sometimes during the wintertime, power goes out because of the lines coming down due to heavy snow and ice buildup. And when those things come on, it's like, make a lot of freaking noise and sound like a jet plane starting up or something like that. It's just loud and noisy. When it first came on, produce a big old black cloud of diesel fumes. And people nowadays, kids nowadays go, oh, it's so hard, It's like, really? I didn't have a laptop computer to carry to and from high school. I did not have a smartphone on my person in school. Back when I was going to high school back in the 90s, they were the old flip phones. They weren't as stealthy as what we have nowadays. Because when you open those flip phones, they make a clicking noise, and unless you knew how to turn off the sound, every button you hit made a noise, and it was only useful for making phone calls or having a phone book or a small calendar to remind you of things. Couldn't play games on them. You couldn't do nothing with them but make phone calls. You know. That digital era has taken over so much. It's not even funny. Ooh. But back in the old days, back in the time of the Viking, that was hard. That was harsh. Their living conditions were harsh. Their climate was harsh. Trying to eke a living out of the hard ground was difficult. You know, life expectancy was maybe 30. If you lived beyond 30, you did pretty darn good. You were either an excellent fighter or you never had to worry about going on the field of battle. You know, and you kept yourself healthy. Granted, most of the reason why living conditions weren't beyond 30, maybe 40, is, you know, starvation, hard winters, killed in battle. Infant mortality was high. So if you were able to make it beyond your teens, you were doing good. That, in fact, you started learning how to do everything and anything at a really young age. I mean, there are stories that talk about children who are 3 or 4 years old trying to help mom or dad herd the sheep, or carry in a small bundle of wood, or help tend the fire. You know, you had your toys during, you know, you had your little wooden horse or little wooden shield or axe or whatever kind of toy mom or dad tried to make for you or purchase for you to teach you, help learn about certain things. Even there's stories about young boys at the age of 12 being sent to learn combat, learn how to wield a shield or a sword or a spear or a bow. So by the time you hit like 14, 15 years old, you're old enough to possibly go raiding with your father. You know, and granted, usually you were left at the camp as a protector of the campsite, while the adults went out and did the hardcore stuff. But you were trained well enough to learn how to use the weapons of the time to defend your campground, tend to the campsite, tend to the fires, be with the women, you know, help protect the women that came not as shield maidens but as, you know, maybe the spouse of one of the warriors, to tend the campsite, prep food, and make sure, you know, when the warriors came back, they were ready to feed the warriors and dress the wounds of the wounded. You know, it was, you know, it was not easy. And that's why, you know, between what I've had to deal with in my lifetime and the histories that I've read, and hear these teenagers and 20-somethings who are at the, you know, in college and whatnot, say how difficult things are, or how they're having a hard time with things because, well, a lot of it is because the fact their mom and dad didn't know how to prep them for it. Now, I'm not saying that it's the parents' fault or anything like that. Maybe the person that is complaining about how hard things are had an easy life, or just didn't think about prepping for living on their own and studying to do something. Most of the complaints I've heard actually is about the weather. And I'm like, I've lived in Germany where if it got above 75, it was something special. But I've also lived in Germany where it got to minus 20. You know, I lived in Arizona where 120 in the shade was a normal summer day, a normal late July, early August day. In fact, I was looking at the weather yesterday and they're already in the hundreds, and I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be a bad summer. You know, so I've been in harsh climates. I've been in the coldest, or the nearly coldest that the world could offer. to areas that, you know, can get in the hundreds. You know, granted, where I live in Germany is not the coldest place in the world. I mean, I know people who live up in Juneau, Alaska, and it could get minus 60 in the middle of the night in the deepest part of winter. So it's not one of those things where it's like, a lot of these young kids, unless they're from like Juneau or some other area of the world that is close to the Arctic Circle or even the Antarctic Circle, there are researchers that live at research facilities in the South Pole. There are researchers that go up and spend months at a time in the, you know, near the South Pole, taking readings and measurements and all that fun stuff. It's not a factor. It's not a fact of where they live. It's more of a fact of how you prepare for where you're going to be. And I tell people all the time, you want to be in Missouri, that's fine and dandy. Carry with you, you know, a light sweat coat or sweat jacket, a raincoat, baseball hat, sunglasses. Any time of the year here in Missouri, it could go from one day it's a nice mild 70 degrees. The next day it's in the upper 80s, close to 90, and then the day after that it's high 90s. Weather here in Missouri changes rapidly, but it does the same thing up in Montana. It does the same thing up in New York. It does not matter where you live. It's how prepared you are to deal with the constantly changing environment that you're in. Heck, you can be up in Juneau, Alaska in the middle of July, you know, bright and sunny all day, you know, 24/7 until the fall. You could, you know, you can go to bed, you know, you could have had a nice, beautiful day the day before. The only thing you had to deal with was maybe the mosquitoes in the evening time or daytime, any time of the day. You can go into your home or wherever you're staying, close the shades to, you know, keep the sun from keeping you awake all night long. Wake up the next morning and there's a 1-inch layer or powdering of snow. You know, yeah, that is an extreme change, but the thing is, it happens, and it's happening more and more all over the world. And I can only imagine with the Vikings, because up north in their home territories of Scandinavia, Norway, wherever, they have harsh climates that are ever changing depending on the way the wind blows. And if you read the stories, you read that they traveled along the western coastline of Europe, all the way down to the Mediterranean, and in from the Mediterranean into the Mediterranean, all the way to Istanbul, Turkey, where it's sunny and hot and muggy and, you know, sand, you know, temperatures that reach as high as we do here in America, the hundreds in the deserts. These people knew that no matter what was thrown at them, they had to be prepared for it. So it wasn't like, oh, we forgot the summer gear. We were traveling from the north when it was still cold. Now we're down here in the Mediterranean and we're hot and sweaty, and, you know, they knew that no matter what they did or what was thrown at them, they had to be prepared to deal with it. And I think that's a life lesson. It's just not them back in their time. It's us today. There are things that happen to us all the time, that are thrown at us all the time. Whether it's weather, whether it's our job, whether it's family tragedy or illness in the family. We're always having something that we have to deal with. And I know that with my anxiety and whatnot, sometimes I have a harder time dealing with it than others. But I am realizing, and I'm using it to my benefit, then if I can keep as positive as possible and happy as possible, I can deal with just about everything. Some of it I can't deal with automatically because of the fact that it's not automatic for me. Um, I am trying. Today's Wednesday. I was supposed to talk about religion. I decided not to. I decided to talk about Vikings and how my knowledge about the Vikings affect me and help me work with things. And yes, this video is now 15 minutes long, and I'm sorry. But this is just something I think I needed to get off my chest, because I think it's a life lesson for everybody. We can look back at our ancestors and see how difficult things were for them and how things have changed over the eras, over the centuries, however you want to put it. And we can use some of that knowledge to better our current lives. Because, yes, a lot of people sit there and go, oh, it's history, it's in the past. Well, I've learned from my own personal experiences that, yeah, it might be in the past, but if we don't learn from our past, it's bound to repeat and become a problem. And I think that's what's happening with America, is we're not remembering our past and trying to learn from it. And we're having problems just within our own borders with our own citizens. We need to learn to live as people in harmony. Just because we have literally every creed, culture, and religion cram-packed into our borders does not mean we can't live in harmony. It means we have to accept and tolerate the differences in their backgrounds and learn to live together. Because we might find things from their background that resemble or come close to our backgrounds and go, hey, we've got these similarities. Whether it's cultural, whether it's food related, whether it's just family history, whether it's similarities of interests. My wife and I had so many similarities in interests. That's why we knew we would be a very good match. Yes, we've had our arguments, we've had our disputes, we've had our disconnects and whatnot. But we both know deep down inside, no matter what, we're still together. I mean, a lot of people would have been understanding if I decided that I was just going to leave my wife and walk away because she had cancer. No. I decided to stick with it. Yes, every so often I sit there and go, do I just need a vacation away from her for a little while? Or, no, I can't walk away. I can't just leave her in her condition and walk away and make her family come get her from this house while I disappear somewhere in the woods of Yellowstone or something like that. No. I could have done that for a summer job instead of stayed here in Missouri looking for a summer job. Which I've gotten plenty of offers. Some of my did not take because, one of the offers I had was the possibility of having an office job in an insurance company, and I was like, no. I'm the type of person who would have given everybody who had a sad story that I can connect with. I would have been like, sign the papers, I'll find a way to get you the money. No. The company would have lost more money than gained. So I knew I couldn't do that. In fact, I woke this morning, there's an offer for a restaurant manager job with Buffalo Wild Wings here in Missouri, and I'm just like, yeah, that's a salary-based job. I would be working buku hours. It's right here in town, but I don't think I want to be a manager, because that's a little bit more than I think I can handle, both physically and psychologically. So I'm kind of like, They came to me saying that my resume on Indeed.com would fit their need, and I was kind of like, I don't know. I don't think so. But anyhow, this is really long, and I'm sorry. Like I said, I had a lot on my brain. But anyhow, if if you stuck with me to the end and enjoyed the whole video, you can give me a thumbs up if you want to. If you have any questions or comments about the video, besides the fact that it was a really long video, go ahead and place those in the comment box. I will deal with them as soon as I can. If you're new to my channel and liked what you heard, either about the Vikings or my opinions or just my life in general, and you choose that you want to stick around and hear more, you can click on the subscribe button, and a little bell will pop up. Once you click on that bell, you are now being told when my next video is up. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Have a good day. Bye.